to Girl Alani here. Welcome back to 3 Degrees of Love Divination. So, welcome back to another Thursday installment of Therapy and Tarot. If you recall what the thumbnail says, we're talking all about communication today and how trauma can impact this style of communication when we interact with other people. And of course, this all stems from our trauma responses and things like that. If you're happening to be here catching me live, or you happen to be watching this on playback, thank you for being here, like I said, and we'll get into it. So I hope that you guys had a great week. I think yesterday, today's the 6th, yes. So yesterday was the supermoon, full moon in Taurus. And of course, all about, grounding our energies and finding balance with our emotions and things like that. And I know that, especially if you're like me and you're very sensitive, you happen to be an empath, that can all be very difficult to do. And depending on, if you follow astrology and you understand all of those things, or whether you or not, you don't, the full moon or any moon cycle really, depending on who you are as a person, can affect us all differently, right? So, so it just, I think in the last few weeks, maybe a couple of weeks, I would say, as I just do what I normally do and observe the world and observe my own interactions with others, observe others, whether it be, people that I come into contact with, who I know, who I speak to, or even just, recalling past situations, or even, people that as infrequently as I go out these days on account of, my own past experiences, me socializing with others is not as frequent as it used to be, not every day, that kind of thing, right? So even just, what I observe on the media, in the media or online and things like that. So and I know, even like I was saying, just as I reflecting back on some of my own trauma, and doing the healing work and the shadow work and all of that, these are some of the things that came up. So how does the question, how does trauma affect how we communicate with others and how we advocate for ourselves? And so there were, when I was reflecting on this and doing my research and stuff, there were 6 points that came up in regards to this. And the first one is hypervigilance and overattunement. So in this case, when the nervous system becomes wired to always scan for danger based on our trauma, it can often lead one to do what I do, overanalyze every situation or interaction with others. And this can include, but is not limited to tone and body language. So, for example, um, you know, having a discussion with somebody about something that may be bothering me, um, and or something that maybe either they did or that I saw happen, and it affected me in some sort of way, right? Um, and so I could be talking about it with somebody, and I'm listening to the words they say, how they say it, if they happen to be right in front of me. I could be looking at things like body language, but most of the time, and it depends, because neurodivergence um, can often, at least in my experience, can lead me to have various thoughts all at once, right? And sometimes, and of course, you're not necessarily going to see that, um, right? Because we can be in a conversation and you could be talking, and I could have a million and one things going on in my head at the moment while still listening to you. Even. But while that's happening, things like body language can be something that may get overlooked, because I may now be focusing on your tone, or something that you said, and I'm trying to decode it, sometimes in the moment, and sometimes depending on um, what when what may have gone on in or said in the conversation. My brain's too busy focusing on that to have a response, or an appropriate response, if even, right? And so I may then find myself walking away from said conversation, only to then overanalyze it later. Whoa, I should have said this, and oh, I should have done that, and why did I say this when I really meant to say that, or blah blah blah. Okay, right? So that's one thing. Over explaining or apologizing to prevent conflict, um, whether or not it may be warranted or the person is actually at fault. I've done that so many times. Apologizing for things that I didn't need to apologize for. Apologizing for the bad mood somebody may be in, even though I didn't cause it. So, and that's some of those behaviors, that fall under the umbrella of fawning, even, which is essentially people pleasing to a certain degree, right? So yeah, and remembering that um, we all have our core emotions, right? But our core emotions then mixed with other emotions can also make for various feelings that are, that are, what's the word I'm looking for? That are combinations of, the various cores. So whether, you're angry and you're sad, or you're you're mad but you're also scared, right? So things like that. um and then, still under this umbrella of the hypervigilance and overattunement, we have difficulty trusting what has been or is being said, reading between the lines for a hidden meaning. So that to me, that sort of just goes back to the whole over analyzing every situation and interaction. Right? I feel like that can be coupled with that. But also, all of those things essentially making communication more of a survival strategy rather than actually building connection with someone. So two, the second of these would be emotional numbing or shutting down. And, this can often include things like addiction. So, it's very important that, as we are reflecting upon these things, that if there is anything further beyond the feelings that is associating with this, that we are seeking the professional assistance that we need to overcome it. So things like um, mental illness and addiction that can play a factor in all of this. So anyways, emotional numbing and shutting down. So for some, trauma causes one to emotionally withdraw or become avoidant. They may begin to speak in a very flat, sort of monotone type of way, or even using minimal words. So, the person may, if you're happening to be living with someone who's sustained trauma, and you ask them about their day, oh, fine, it was fine, and then on and about they go. That would be a perfect example of the emotional numbing or even shutting down, because they don't want to talk about what is actually going on. They may then avoid difficult conversations to keep the peace. I know that I've done this. Feel frozen when trying to express emotions, as if the words just seem to evade them, or even not being able to find the right words to describe what it is that they're actually feeling. And so rather than try to explain, it's just easier to just not talk at all. Just avoid the topic altogether. And this would fall under the trauma response of freeze even. 3, reactive or or defensiveness. So when communication feels unsafe, trauma can trigger fight responses, right? So and if we're not remembering what the trauma responses are, you have fight, flight, freeze, and fawn. And then you have, so under reactiveness and defensiveness, when the said person who's sustained trauma feels unsafe, you might find that they are doing things like, and not, I say this with a grain of salt, okay? Because there are other factors, such as being neurodivergent, that can also elicit some of these responses, but don't necessarily always. So that's why not always meaning what I'm saying. So, which is why communication and being open with and vulnerable with one another is so important, because you're not going to know unless you actually have a discussion. So, but for someone who is triggered into fight responses, that might be somebody who is constantly talking over others or becoming loud when feeling unheard. I know that this is something that, often for, those who have been made to suppress their, to suppress themselves, or, the whole idea of little girls are seen and never heard. That whole, idea is what's happened to be popping popping into my mind as I speak. But yeah, but the idea of talking over others and sometimes becoming loud, doesn't always necessarily mean, and that's why I'm saying it all depends on the context as well, because someone who may be ADHD, whose mind is constantly racing and bouncing and having ideas and stuff like that. I find that oftentimes we, and I say we because, I know that I can be guilty of this too. When we get excited, it doesn't just have to be in regards to trauma, but when we get excited or have an idea that just, that it infiltrates our brains, if you will, and it needs to come out. Sometimes we may find, in mid sentence or listening to somebody else, it's like, oh, right? But but and that's where, again, the whole idea of doing the shadow work and all of the reflection sort of comes in, because being able to tell the difference. And of course, when you are, when you realize that it's just excitement, you're able to express that. Oh, excuse me, I have to get this one thing out. I know you were in the middle of saying something, but I just need to. Versus someone who is just bold and just, all of a sudden, out of nowhere, out of left field, while somebody else is talking, just butt in and say their piece. So, there's again, depending on the situation, you have to take everything with a grain of salt, right? And factor in things like context. So anyways, but again, another thing is a person who is triggered and is triggered into fight responses. These are those that are quick to anger, sarcasm, or sharpness, in an attempt to regain control. The other thing that came to mind is the whole idea of passive aggressiveness. So, someone, coming to you to say, I last minute, oh, I forgot to lock the door. Can you lock the door for me? Okay. A person who's passive aggressive is, huh, well, I guess I can. I mean, everything that, is forgotten always has to be picked up by me, right? Something like that. So it's that you're not, the person is not necessarily yelling or shouting to be heard, but there's a cunning undertone to their response. I'm sure, yeah, I can do it, but right. So, and then interpreting neutral feedback as criticism or a form of rejection. Now, this I feel is something that is an easy trap to fall into, especially with someone who is now I'm thinking of those that may have suffered a bullying, or been bullied in school or in a relationship, right? Or even by family members, parents. even um, the and especially with someone who has endured childhood trauma, constantly overcorrecting, why'd you do it this way? That's not right. You need to do it this way, and things like that. Those are the things that can often make someone who sees or hears neutral feedback and can easily take it as criticism, or even rejection, because it's like what they do isn't good enough, so therefore they're wrong, when that may not even be the case. So anything that is said after that can easily be taken as rejection or harsh criticism, when it may not in fact be. So that's why it's very important, again, for the self-reflection, right? Under all that intensity is often a deep fear of being hurt or taken advantage of again. Victims of bullying, like I said, can often turn into bullies themselves when wounds go unhealed and without even realizing it. Especially, when it's the bully is a parent, right? And it becomes programmed into you. Now you become like, that's the way that you're supposed to handle situations, so that bullied kid or individual may then turn and go out into the world, and find themselves bullying friends, maybe coworkers, right? Other participants, depending on the situation, of course. Or even, later become parents themselves, or being in the caregiving role and taking on the form of the bully. So if you remember, I spoke about in previous videos about the idea of falling victim or perpetrator, and how that can, how that often we fall into those categories, after sustaining trauma. We either repeat the cycle, but on the perpetrator, as a perpetrator, or we continue to repeat the cycle of the victim. So, but yeah. And then, so that was 3. 4, we have fawning, as and this is the category also known as people pleasing. Those that fall into the people pleasing category of a trauma response would fall right here in the category of fawning. So many survivors of trauma, especially those, as I had said, with childhood trauma, or any, some sort of relational trauma, learning to keep the peace by pleasing others. So that would include things like avoiding confrontation at all costs, saying yes to things when really you want to say no, adopting others' opinions to feel accepted. And then what ends up happening over time is the communication becomes adaptive, shaped by a need to be loved or to feel safe, even, rather than being true to self. So rather than being authentic. And then the other point to this, that how trauma can affect our communication skills is leaving us fragmented. Our self-expression is left fragmented because trauma has taken away certain aspects of self and self-expression, whether we end up suppressing certain aspects of self, right? And then it gets buried in the shadows of self, right? And that can show up as contradictory feelings. So having a thought process or a statement of, like, for example, I want closeness, I want companionship, but I'm afraid of commitment, or I can't handle being close because something about it ends up making me feel unsafe. Constantly switching between oversharing and then being completely closed off. Feeling misunderstood or unseen when trying to be expressive. It's like trying to communicate from a multiple emotional timelines at once. So thinking about, your inner child, the version of you that is the protector, your teenager self, your adult self, all of them having voices and all wanting to speak at once. And so that making for a very mismatch up of expression that can often leave us feeling confused, and as well as other people who we're trying to communicate with. But coming to the sixth point is that communication can also be very healing, right? As I spoke about the different contexts, and that some of these situations can fall into, and then that's how we create misunderstandings with one another when we're not exactly sure about the context of what's happening and the response within it. So that's why being able to communicate effectively with patience, with love, with understanding, with acceptance can also lead for a very healing opportunity. As we begin to rebuild safety within our bodies and relationships, we begin to learn how to speak from a place of self-trust and not fear. We learn how to set healthy boundaries even without guilt. Listen to others with curiosity and compassion rather than defense. And then learning how to express our needs clearly, knowing that they are valid. Other things that can help with this, things like somatic experiences. And of course, if you recall, I have spoken about a good friend, Stephanie of Strength Discovered, who does somatic exercises on her channel. So feel free to check that out. And I will have her link down in the description box down below. But also, we have things like somatic exercises and healing practices, doing inner child work, some of the therapy, professional therapy practices, like CBT, or DBT, so cognitive behavioral therapy, or dialectical behavioral therapy, and these are things that often stem from seeing a professional psychologist, psychiatrist, social worker, psychotherapist, right? Any of those things. Even if you are mixing in things like medication, for example, because you may be dealing with mental illness, or or addiction. So seeking professional assistance, reaching out to your doctor or a therapist, psychiatrist. All of these things are important. So even uh, things including talk therapy, nonviolent communication can also help to bridge the gap between your nervous system and your words. So I feel like that was just something, like I said, that I wanted to discuss with you guys today, and share a little bit about what I have been reflecting on, and what's has sort of come up for me, and how I've been dealing with that, and as I reflect on my past experiences, and even with others, things like therapy, shadow work, combining therapy and tarot, for further introspection and stuff like that. So with all that being said, let's pull some cards for today. Excuse me. I'm gonna pull from the okay. I'm gonna pull from, again, this is the From Roots to Bloom Oracle deck, by Haley Wait. And this, well, unfortunately, this is the deck that's out of print right now. But I hope that the creator will be able to either create another edition or an expansion, because this is an absolutely fabulous deck, and I absolutely love it. For shadow work, for opportunities of affirmations when it is needed. So let's see what we get from this deck today for the collective. Regarding communication, trauma, how we heal, and how we can raise our vibrations and frequency so that we can come together in loving harmony with ourselves and with each other for the greatest and highest good of all. What do we have for us today, please? Okay. All right, so okay. So I have two cards that came out. Okay. So the two cards that came out, 45, release your regrets, fears, guilt, shame. That's the first card to come out. And the second card, 48, is it's okay to feel cracked or broken. That's where the water reaches the roots. So I love that. Okay, let's start with 45. Release your regrets, fears, guilt, shame. To me, so far, it's speaking to me in regards to the idea that, you know, as you know, trauma impacts us and shapes us in many, many various ways, and alters the ways in which we may communicate with one another. It's important to remember that as we are created and we live our lives and we walk various paths, everything that we do is up for trial and error. And no no situation that we ever find ourselves in is ever going to be perfect. Um, and neither are the people that are going to be a part of said situation. So, for example, any interaction that we may have with others, it's going to include perfectly imperfect human beings. So, therefore, you know, there's no right or wrong way. Well, there well, yes, there is, but we learn that as we interact with others, and based on the fact that we are coming in as perfectly imperfect people with our various journeys and baggages and things like that, the interactions that we may have with one another, whether or not we have good intent, is always going to come is always going to come at us in a form of a trial, right? And so we always want to make sure that we're putting our best foot forward, right? The best versions of ourselves forward. But however, sometimes the results that we get in return may not always be the best, because no one is perfect, right? So it's important that even when we find ourselves in situations where that didn't go well, didn't go great, we have the opportunity to release the regrets, the fears, the guilt, and the shame, reflect upon what worked, what didn't, take the parts that were positive and the others that that weren't so great, and use that as keys for learning, so that the next time we're in another situation that may resemble this one, we know better, and so therefore we can do better. Okay, so 48. It's okay to feel cracked or broken. That's where the water reaches the roots. It's okay to not be perfect. It's through the fractures that we learn to grow. Okay, so let me just read 45. Okay, 45, 45, 45. Okay. 45. Release your regrets, fears, guilt, and shame. Imagine how freeing it would be to let go of the hold that past mistakes, missed opportunities, and self doubt have on you. It's actually possible to do this right now. We just have to stop, look, and listen to where we are investing our energy? It is it, sorry, in the past, the present, or the future? As humans, we are endowed with numerous gifts as well as numerous flaws, but these so called flaws are actually hidden opportunities for growth and transformation. Releasing our attachment to the past and the sorrows we associate with it unburdens the mind, body, and spirit, allowing us to reach for our potential. Okay, so now we have questions for reflection. Question 1: what fear, regret, or guilt has most burdened or blocked your growth? 2: how can you explore more deeply what you need to release from the past? And 3: what would feel more accessible to you if you could release the guilt and regret you've been carrying? Okay. And now we have card 48. And that one is, again, card 48. We have, it's okay to feel cracked or broken. That's where the water reaches the roots. Okay. All right, 48. It's okay to feel cracked or even broken. That's where the water reaches the roots. A gentle rain shower seeps into the cracks and crevices of the earth to quench thirsty roots below and nourish blooms above. Our past traumas and current challenges can make us feel as hard, dry, and cracked as parched soil. Yet it is through these cracks and crevices that wisdom enters, watering the deep roots of understanding, tolerance, and forgiveness. In turn, our fortitude and fearlessness blossom and we become whole. Yes, absolutely. Okay, so we have questions for reflection. 1: what has made you feel cracked or broken? 2: how can you allow feelings of brokenness to empower rather than diminish you? And 3: in what ways have challenges and distressing experiences contributed to your growth and transformation? Yes, absolutely. And I, just as I'm reading this and I'm reflecting and I'm thinking and about even how I would answer that. And one of the things that I think about is that as much and as hurtful as my last 12 years have been, for me, in this journey of life, and having to dark night of soul and all of that, um it has brought me to the point where, yeah, I have a very, well, like I said, and I've said this before, I wouldn't have started this channel had I not gone through what I've been through. I would not have learned some of the things that I've learned about myself, about other people, about how I process my own emotions, um, and just realizing that, I mean, not to say I didn't know this before, but it's like it's another level of understanding of, how we're all different. Um, but we're all the same. We're all the same because we are all human beings. We are all the same because we all have feelings. We're all the same because we live in a society where, we have to interact with others. We have to work. We have to eat. We have to sleep. We have to do all of these things. It's what being alive is all about. But there's so much more to that. And and it's through meeting others, it's through the interactions, you know with others, that you learn and grow, and exposed to other cultures and other ways of doing things and other perspectives, you know um so without those experiences, I wouldn't have the knowledge that I have now. I also probably wouldn't have, you know, I have some of the health problems that I do now either, but, you know, that's life. So yeah, and then let's pull one card from the Lithra Tarot, see what other messages that we can have to layer upon these as we close out this therapy and tarot session together today. And one thing that we can have in mind as we move forward. So let's see. Okay. Okay. So the one card that came out here is the card of balance. And here it says balance, fairness, and clarity are key in this moment. Decisions made with integrity will lead to harmony. Be mindful of the energy you put into the world. It will return to you. Trust in the justice of universal laws to restore equilibrium. So how perfect is that, even just to close out, the importance of balancing our thoughts and our emotions, doing the healing work so that when we are interacting with other people in our lives, we are approaching each situation in a more balanced way. We're not leading with our traumas, but we are learning from them. So that when we go forth in our interactions with other people, we are learning how about fairness, about compassion, about integrity and empathy. And knowing that just as we want to be heard and understood for everything that we are and that we've endured, we also have to be willing to create space, that same space, for others as well. So it's really a give and take relationship. It's a give and take of mind and heart in the body, and how we are then giving and receiving that balanced interaction with others. So these are the cards that I have for you today. We have 45. Like I said, release your regrets, fears, guilt, and shame. Along with 48, it's okay to feel cracked or broken. That's where the water reaches the roots. And balance. So, yeah. So I hope that you guys enjoyed today's live. What I had to say on the topic of communication and how we are, how our communication impacts, or how our trauma, impacts our communication that we have with others. And of course, the cards that I've pulled today to go along with said discussion for reflection. And yeah, so with all that being said, I want to thank you guys for joining me. And of course, if you're catching this on playback, that you will consider commenting down below. Let me know what you thought of the video. Of course, don't forget to hit the notification bell so you always be in the know when I post my next video. And also hit that like, and I hope that you'll join me next time. So as I always say, I am love and so are you. As I see myself as human, I know you are too. So as I leave you here today, please always remember to take care of yourself and one another. And while you're at it, don't forget about me too. And until we chat again, always remember to check your privilege, mind your magic, and as always, live, listen, and learn. I love you all so, so much. Bye, everybody. Take care.